That night, the apartment felt smaller than ever. I sat at the kitchen table under the single warm lamp, surrounded by papers, my laptop glowing in front of me. The restaurant uniform was still on, apron tossed over the back of the chair. I couldn't sleep. Not yet. Not while the numbers refused to add up. I opened the payroll portal first. The screen lit my face with its cold blue light. There it was, my latest deposit. Smaller than it should have been. Again. I pulled up the pay stub and compared it to the schedule I had saved. Hours listed versus hours actually paid. The gap was unmistakable. Not a rounding error, not a tax thing. Missing money. My stomach tightened. "This isn't a mistake," I whispered into the quiet room. I opened my banking app on my phone and placed it beside the laptop. Side by side, the numbers lied to no one. The deposit was short by almost a full shift's worth, and this wasn't the first time. I pulled out the printed stubs I had kept from the last few weeks, spread them across the table like evidence at a crime scene. Calculator in one hand, pen in the other. I did the math once, then twice. My fingers trembled slightly on the keys, but my mind stayed sharp. Expected pay based on scheduled hours, actual deposit. The difference stared back at me in cold black and white. Not small, not accidental, consistent. I leaned back, rubbing my forehead. The exhaustion from the shift mixed with a new kind of weight. This wasn't just hour cuts anymore. This was money disappearing after the fact. Someone was editing things on the back end, and the only person with that kind of access was Derek. I felt the old sting behind my eyes, the wounded part of me that still wanted to believe it was all a misunderstanding, but that part was getting quieter. The strategic part was louder now. I created a new spreadsheet tab, labeled it simply expected versus actual. Columns for date, scheduled hours, paid hours, expected deposit, actual deposit, difference. I started filling it in, row after row. The pattern emerged quickly. Small discrepancies at first, then larger ones right after I had asked questions, right after I had spoken to HR, right after Talia's warning. Retaliation. Not loud, not obvious, but clear if you knew how to look. I highlighted the mismatched rows in red, circled them on the printed statements with a pen. The ink felt permanent, real, proof that couldn't be gaslit away. My back ached from leaning over the table, but I kept going. I opened the schedule history next, side by side with the payroll records. That's when I saw the tiny edits. Shifts changed after the fact. Hours added or removed in the system with timestamps that didn't match reality. Ghost adjustments. Someone was moving numbers around like chess pieces. I sat very still for a moment, letting the realization settle. This wasn't sloppy management. This was deliberate. Derek wasn't just cutting my hours to push me out. He was altering records to cover it up, making it look like I had worked less than I actually had. Or worse, creating phantom shifts to justify other discrepancies. The wounded urgency from the first confrontation was still there, but it had company now, cold anger. And beneath that, a growing sense of power. Because once you see the pattern, you can start to map it. I dragged every screenshot, every pay stub scan, every bank statement into organized folders. Schedules, payroll, bank deposits, emails. I labeled them clearly, backed everything up to the cloud twice. Then I added a password to the main folder, not because I thought Derek could reach it, but because I was starting to treat this like the serious record it was becoming. The apartment was quiet except for the soft hum of the laptop fan. Unpaid bill envelopes sat at the edge of the table like silent witnesses. A rent due reminder glowed on my phone screen. The financial stakes were real. They had always been real, but tonight they felt like fuel instead of just fear. I wrote a single line on a piece of paper in clear block letters. This is not a mistake. I underlined it twice. Then I kept working, cross-referencing, highlighting, building the timeline. Every entry made the picture sharper. Derek's cuts weren't random. They followed my questions about pay like clockwork. The edits in the system happened at odd hours, times when I wasn't even at work. By the time the lamp started to feel too bright, I had a clear, documented chain. Not enough for court yet, but enough to know I wasn't crazy. Enough to know I had to keep going. I rubbed my tired eyes and leaned back. The fear was still present, sitting low in my chest, but it no longer owned the night. Resolve did. I opened the main folder one last time. Derek Receipts stared back at me. It looked almost too simple for the weight it carried, but it was growing, steadily, quietly. Each new entry another brick in the wall I was building between me and his attempts to erase me. I saved everything again. Then I placed my phone face down on the table and took a long, slow breath. Tomorrow, I would go back in. I would work whatever reduced schedule he gave me. I would stay professional on the surface, but underneath, I would continue watching, noting, adding to the record. Because the missing money wasn't just dollars anymore. It was proof. And proof, once collected carefully, has a way of demanding answers. The clock on the microwave glowed past midnight, but sleep still felt miles away. I sat alone at the kitchen table, the warm lamp casting long shadows across the scattered papers. My eyes burned from staring at screens, yet every new row I added to the spreadsheet made the picture sharper. I opened the schedule history again, this time digging deeper into the audit trail the system kept. Tiny changes appeared, shifts edited after they had already been worked, hours added or subtracted with timestamps that didn't match my clock-ins. Someone had gone in later and adjusted the record. My breath caught. Ghost shifts, I whispered. Entries for times I had never been at the restaurant. Late-night inventory that supposedly I had worked, but I knew I hadn't. I had been home, exhausted, trying to stretch the money I did have. The realization landed heavy. This wasn't sloppy bookkeeping. This was intentional manipulation. Derek, or someone under his direction, was creating a false paper trail to justify the short deposits, making it look like the money had gone somewhere legitimate when it simply hadn't. I highlighted the edited rows, circled the discrepancies on the printed statements. My pen moved with more certainty now. The trembling from earlier had steadied into focused determination. Fear was still present, sitting low and tight in my chest, but it no longer paralyzed me. It sharpened me. I dragged more files into the organized folders: schedules, payroll, bank deposits, system edit logs I had screenshotted. Everything labeled with dates and clear descriptions. After the fact edit, hours reduced. Ghost shift added, never worked. Deposit short by 1 shift equivalent. The more I documented, the more the pattern revealed itself. The cuts and edits always followed moments when I had asked questions, when I had mentioned pay to a coworker, when I had gone to HR. Retaliation disguised as routine adjustments. I leaned back and rubbed my forehead. The apartment was silent except for the soft click of the laptop fan. Unpaid bill envelopes sat at the edge of the table like silent witnesses. A rent due reminder glowed on my phone screen. The financial stakes were real. They had always been real, but tonight they felt like fuel instead of just fear. I opened a new document and started writing headings in clean block letters. Dates, scheduled hours, actual hours paid, edits noted, discrepancy amount, expected deposit versus actual deposit. Each heading felt like a shield, a way to turn chaos into something structured, something that could stand up if this ever went further than my kitchen table. My tired eyes scanned the growing timeline. The fear that had gripped me by the fridge was transforming. It was becoming investigative focus, cold, clear, strategic. I whispered to the empty room, voice low and steady. This is not random. This is deliberate, and I see it now. The words felt powerful, not loud, not dramatic, but true. I saved the spreadsheet. Then I opened the cloud storage and created an extra backup folder. I uploaded everything again: screenshots, notes, calculations. Added a strong password and enabled 2-factor, because if Derek could edit the company system, I wasn't taking any chances with my own records. As the upload progress bar filled, a strange calm settled over me. The kind that comes when you stop hoping someone else will fix it and start fixing it yourself. I wasn't naive. One folder of evidence wouldn't magically restore my hours or my missing pay, but it was the beginning of something undeniable, a record that proved the pattern. I placed my phone face down on the table and took a long, slow breath. The lamplight felt warmer now. The apartment, though still small and cluttered with bills, felt less like a trap and more like a command center. I thought about the scared version of me, the one that had stood frozen, holding her apron strings, apologizing with her body for simply needing to pay rent. She still lived inside my ribs, tender, watchful, but she was no longer running the night. A new version was stepping forward, one that did the math twice, one that highlighted discrepancies in red, one that backed everything up twice and whispered rules to herself like armor: document, stay calm, stay smart. I closed the laptop briefly, overwhelmed by the sheer volume of what I had uncovered in just a few hours, but I didn't stop. I reopened it with renewed focus, determination rising like a slow tide. The folder name glowed on the screen: Derek Receipts. It looked almost too ordinary for the weight it carried, but it was growing, steadily, quietly. Each new entry another brick in the wall I was building between me and his attempts to erase me. I leaned back in the chair, surrounded by the evidence layout that had gone from chaotic to organized. The visual shift mirrored what was happening inside me, from fear to strategy, from victim of the cuts to investigator of the pattern. Tomorrow I would walk back into that restaurant. I would work whatever reduced schedule he gave me. I would stay professional on the surface, but underneath I would continue watching, noting, adding to the record. Because the missing money wasn't just dollars anymore. It was proof, and proof, once collected carefully, has a way of demanding answers. The lamp on the kitchen table cast a warm pool of light over the evidence that now covered almost every inch of the surface. Papers, printed stubs, circled numbers, highlighted rows. It looked like the workspace of someone who had stopped hoping and started building. I wrote one final heading on a fresh sheet of paper in clear, deliberate letters. This is not a mistake. I underlined it twice, then set the pen down. The words felt like a line in the sand, a quiet declaration that I refused to let Derek's actions be dismissed as oversight or bad luck. I leaned back and stared at the organized layout. What had started as chaotic panic earlier in the night had become something structured, a timeline, a pattern, proof that the missing money, the edited shifts, the ghost entries, all of it followed the same rhythm. My questions about pay, my quiet pushback, his response. The fear that had gripped me so tightly by the fridge was still there, but it had been joined by something colder and more useful: investigative focus. I wasn't crying anymore. I was calculating. I opened the cloud backup folder and watched the final files upload, progress bar filling steadily. Each green checkmark felt like another layer of protection. I added an extra password and enabled notifications for any access attempts. Small steps, but they mattered. Because if Derek could reach into the company system and rewrite reality, I wasn't leaving my own record vulnerable. When the upload completed, I let out a long, slow breath, the kind that carries the weight of discovery and leaves room for the next decision. I sat there, surrounded by the evidence, the apartment quiet except for the distant hum of the city outside. The rent reminder on my phone still glowed, but tonight it didn't feel like a threat. It felt like motivation, a reminder of exactly what was at stake and why I couldn't look away. My eyes were tired, my back ached, but my mind felt clearer than it had since the first cut. The wounded part of me, the one who had stood confused and vulnerable by the break room fridge, was still present. She lived quietly inside, tender and watchful, but she was no longer leading. A stronger version had stepped forward, one that did the math twice, one that highlighted discrepancies without apology, one that whispered rules to herself like armor. Document everything, stay calm on the surface, build the record faster than he can erase it. I closed the laptop for a moment and just breathed. The lamplight felt softer now. The scattered papers no longer looked chaotic. They looked like preparation. I thought about walking back into the restaurant tomorrow. The reduced schedule, Derek's watchful eyes, the careful smiles I would have to wear while every interaction became another entry. It would be exhausting, but it would also be deliberate. I reopened the laptop one last time. The folder glowed on the screen. Derek Receipts. It was no longer just a name. It was a commitment, a quiet vow that every missing dollar, every edited hour, every subtle threat would be noted, time-stamped, and preserved. I stared at it for a long moment, the soft light reflecting in my dark brown eyes. Fear and resolve sat side by side now. The fear was smaller. The resolve was growing. I saved everything one final time, then placed my phone face down on the table. The apartment felt different in that moment. Not smaller, not heavier, more like a quiet command post where the first real countermoves were being planned. Tomorrow I would return to work. I would do my job with dignity. I would watch and listen and continue adding to the record. Not loudly, not emotionally, but methodically. Because the pattern was no longer hidden. I saw it, and once seen, it could be exposed. I stood up slowly, turned off the lamp, and walked toward the bedroom. The night city sounds drifted faintly through the window. Somewhere out there, Derek was probably sleeping soundly, convinced his push-out was working. He had no idea that the woman he was trying to erase was awake, building a file that would eventually speak louder than his edits. As I lay down, the scared version of me still curled quietly inside my ribs. But beside her sat someone new, someone who had done the math, someone who had highlighted the discrepancies in red, someone who had backed everything up twice and whispered to herself in the dark, "This is not a mistake, and I am no longer just surviving it, I am documenting it." The folder name still glowed behind my closed eyes as sleep finally came. Derek Receipts. A quiet beginning, a firm promise, the first real step from fear toward justice.